think LinkedIn is a mirage. I hate to say that, especially in Japan. That's again a cultural thing for companies. Apac talent acquisition teams are thinking, okay, we'll go on LinkedIn. We will scout people on LinkedIn. Majority of people are not on LinkedIn in Japan. LinkedIn hasn't done a lot of engineering to help Japan. It's not that big a market for them, so they don't do a lot of work for the Japanese market. So it's not that important. Japanese just don't want to put their public information out there. It's not normal how things are going. And then when they receive a scout mail from, say, a talent acquisition person that's outside Japan, they don't know the person. It's very scary to them. And oftentimes we'll have talents come to us and say, I got this message. What do I do?
Hello and welcome back to Asia AIM, the podcast that shines a light on the people, ideas, and innovation shaping business, marketing, and communications in Japan and across the Apac region. I'm your host, Robert Heldt. Today, we are discussing one of the most urgent issues facing companies in Japan. That is talent. Japan's demographic reality is no longer a future problem because it is here. The workforce in Japan is shrinking. Competition for bilingual and globally minded professionals is very intense, and traditional hiring approaches aren't just working the way they used to. To unpack all of this, I'm joined by Dr. David Sweet, founder and CEO of Focus Core Group, one of Japan's leading executive search firms. David has spent nearly 3 decades in Japan advising top-tier companies on recruitment, leadership, and employer branding. Before that, he worked in labor relations and employee development for the US government. So he brings a rare cross-cultural and strategic perspective to hiring. He is also an author, executive coach, and host of the Focus Core podcast, a brilliant podcast that I've appeared on and really love it. And he's also someone who's been in the Japanese recruitment market for a very long time. So he's seen it evolve from fax machines, you heard me right, to LinkedIn. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with David. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robert. You've made us feel old. Wise. We feel wise today.
Indeed, and yes, the market has changed a lot. So I'm really excited to learn what's happening. So you've been here for 3 decades now. When you look back, what's changed the most in the recruitment market?
That's a great question. I think the challenge has always been relationships. This is being here 3 decades, you see relationships, and the people that have good relationships do very, very well. Those that try to do transactional business don't fare very well here. And so that's been a stable throughout the last 30 years. That hasn't changed, though. Some of the process has changed. We used to look at the newspaper on Monday and see those ads and see what jobs were on, and started using the internet. And we were talking in the office there. They used to use maps to get around town, and you'd always stand in front of the copy machine getting the maps. And now you have Google Maps, and you can get to anywhere. You do things online, but still, even with the ease of communication, the ease of data, nothing has beat straight communication and relationships. So I still think it's important to go out and have coffees with people, have lunches, dinners, and that hasn't changed.
Yeah, it's very true. It's still a people business, right? And the best way to communicate and interact is that relationship, right? Relationship building. In Japan, such a big relationship culture. So to do business, to be successful here, relationships are important. Yeah. So we hear a lot about Japan's talent shortage, right? From where you sit, how serious is it really?
Yeah, it's an epidemic. It faces challenges in different levels of companies, right? If you're an enterprise company, there's a huge shortage of skilled labor in niche areas for companies. Like if you're doing coding, then that's a huge challenge. But a lot of what we service here is SMEs, and if you're trying to get a CFO out of an enterprise into an SME, that can always be a challenge. And there's not the breadth of talent, bilingual, bicultural talent, high skilled talent that are in other markets. Oftentimes we'll have someone from Europe or the US say, well, where's the short list of 30? And there just isn't that. There's never going to be that. The other shortage, obviously, is the aging population, right? And the challenge around that is a lot of these companies coming into Japan or wanting to hire dynamic talent, meaning younger talent. I've had companies come in and they want a 30-year-old, 35-year-old CFO. One, there's not that echelon of young talent, and Japanese don't tend to breed young senior people. It's a step-by-step process, so they tend to be a bit older anyway. So I think that shortage is also a challenge. Now, with all that said, there are definitely ways around some of these shortages, and I don't see a lot of companies taking advantage of what they can do to really attract talent and looking at alternative ways of hiring people, looking at, interim specialization, interim CEOs, interim CFOs is a big one that really helps. Looking at foreigners for certain jobs where either a Japanese face or Japanese mindset or Japanese language isn't necessary. A lot of times companies feel that they need someone at that level of Japanese and they don't. Mm-hmm. And still there's the mindset with a lot of companies, if this person is 50 and this person's 51, we can't hire the 51-year-old to be a subordinate of the 50-year-old. And that mindset is still there in Gaishikes where there are predominantly Japanese people inside. So there's challenges, there's solutions that aren't being tapped into that make it even more difficult.
So do you think this is something that's going to self-correct, or are we looking at long-term, very structural shift?
Structural shift. Two things that I think will happen, though the recent government changes make it more difficult, is foreigners. You'll hire foreigners. AI will definitely take over certain jobs. So the rest of the world's worried about losing their jobs. In Japan, we should be thankful that we have some technology that can take over some of the jobs where we just don't have the human capability, the human power to do that. The third thing that I see will and is happening is that companies will just not put certain positions in Japan. Japan will just lose some of the strategic value that is available. Some of the human capital will just leave. And we're already seeing that where I was at a global conference of search professionals in Thailand. No one was speaking about Japan. Mm-hmm. People weren't really talking about China or anywhere else. They were talking about India. They're mm-hmm. talking about Thailand. They're talking about Vietnam. Those are the hotbeds. And you talk about India, the average age of people in India are 27. They're highly educated. They're energetic. English is taught and spoken, whereas in Japan it's a barrier. So you just move certain things into India or elsewhere in the world. It's just easier.
Yeah, that's such a shame, right? Because Japan is such a unique market where you really need senior strategic level talent in the market to really understand how business runs and operates here. It's often we have the same challenge. We've got, regional strategic leaders trying to sort of rein in Japan when it's so challenging, to understand how the workforce operates and managing a workforce from, even if you're based in Singapore or Thailand or India, it is quite a challenge. You mentioned structural change is needed, and you also mentioned the interim roles. What I'm also seeing popping up is this fractional C-level roles. Is that how is that different from interim?
I wrote, I got a paper on our website if anybody wants directed to that about the difference between fractional and interim. So you bring in an interim, the interim person should go in there and you expect them to hit the ground running, set up certain processes, really look at making some structural systems upgraded, and probably being a bridge for someone coming in. A fractional C leader will be someone that's there long term, usually, but will be working at different locations. So, for example, both of our companies, we're smaller companies. We don't need a full-time CFO. Do we need CFO leadership, guideline insights on occasion? Yes. So if we had someone come in and do that on a fractional basis, then it makes sense. If they're working with you for a couple of days, coming into focus for a couple of days, it's all the same. So that's how I see the difference kind of set out. In the U.S., this was pretty common when I was doing some work in the U.S. 20 years ago, and it's now finally catching up to us in Japan.
Okay, thanks for explaining that.
There's still, because it's new, there's still a lot of education around it, a lot of skepticism around it, a lot of misunderstandings, and how to utilize the talent. And then it's a mind shift for the talent. The pandemic helped us out where certain people over 50 decided, lifestyle's important. And I would like to do some consulting. I would like to not have a full-time job, and it's a lifestyle. And so there is some market there, but it's still it hasn't grown as much. But with an aging population, that group of people will be there. So that's definitely something that companies should be tapping into.
Okay. And just kind of keeping with this, fractional, way to attract senior talent. And Japan also has this Komon system. Is that similar? Is that same? Can you explain Komon for our international audience? Because we've had clients, that we've advised to put in a Komon or hire a Komon who often comes with, experience, but also connections, has international exposure, and can really bridge that gap. So maybe if you can explain Komon and how is that related to fractional or interim?
I don't come up against it much, so I don't. Okay. I'm not even going to tackle that question. I don't because we are as a company do interim for Common. I haven't come up against that for any of the C-suite roles that we have.
Okay. That's thanks for sharing that. So, what do you see are the biggest gaps in talent shortage? Is it industry specific? Is it skill specific? Or is it leadership specific?
All of the above. We're starting out awfully pessimistic today, Robert. There's, I think, there's all these challenges. We have to remember it's a big economy and there's lots of opportunities. That I think that the shortages that I see are things like accounting. For example, it's a basic role and there's a huge shortage of accountants. Young people tend not to want to get into accounting partly because AI can take over a lot of that. So there's not a lot of people really wanting to go in that. People are already doing accounting oftentimes when they get more senior, want to move into an FP&A role and out of accounting. So things like that are definitely challenging. Sales, there's hardly a leader I talk to that's not searching for young hunter-type salespeople in the market at every level, whether that's from sales director all the way down, looking for good sales talent. And it's not a matter of budgets; it's a matter of that talent doesn't exist much, so it's very tight. When you get into senior leadership roles, what I've seen over the last 3 decades is that there has been less and less global mindset in the senior leadership in Japan, and I find that can be a challenge for international companies that are looking to come into Japan and hire that first employee, and especially when they want to put a lot of money into it. And so oftentimes, it depends on the company. I'll give you a couple examples, but we had a German company that was coming in, had a mammoth contract with one of the 6 large drink companies. And it was just, they wanted a good, strong Japanese leader. And to be able to drive that business, to grow it fast, I said you should hire someone that's foreigner. Because when you're starting up in Japan, there's so many potholes, there's so many challenges, and you really need a bridge between Japan and home office, and you need it honest. You don't need to go through cultural barriers. You really need that communication channel. And sometimes if you hire someone locally, that can be a challenge, whether it's communication. And sometimes the skills are here, but it's just that communication aspect isn't worth that first hire. And so then the second hire is that kind of bridge to the local and national level versus the international level. So I would say, I mean, across all industries, at all levels, skills are short supply sometimes.
I guess that, puts a lot more emphasis then on the need for employer branding. So let's talk a little bit about employer branding. And
I love employer branding, Robert.
That's great. Yeah, we love it too. We have quite a few clients that we do help with employer branding because it's so important. Like you mentioned, the example of a German company, entering, they want to attract top talent right away, but nobody knows them. Nobody's heard of them. And why would a senior Japanese talent take a huge risk to switch from their stable job to an unknown entity, right? So traditionally, Japanese companies, rely on stability and reputation, and that's changing as well. But then you've got, gaishike, foreign companies coming here. So can you tell us about, how employer branding works? What are you doing in advising clients about, what to do for raising their profile in the market? And what are the talent? What are the candidates looking for when it comes to, engaging with a brand?
Okay, there's a lot of questions, and I'm going to back up a little bit first. The first challenge is really realizing that employee branding is needed. I think that's for a foreign capital company in Japan. If companies coming in Japan or already established companies, I have one of our global leader transportation company. They have yellow planes. You would know them. We were talking to the global HR person, and she was smart. She said, "What's the perception of our company within Japan?" And said, "It's not good. You're not an employer of choice for Japanese nationals. There's other big players, so you're a minor player in Japan, even though globally, global leader. Japan, not so much so. You're a gaishike, so that's not as attractive for most Japanese people, which is unrealized sometimes." And then when you talk about, say, startups, that's, again, making sure that, coming from America or from Europe, where entrepreneurial spirit is wonderful, it's a great opportunity to lead a company. In Japan, that's not necessarily the case. It's looked at by the family, by friends, as unstable, and not a great step from a kind of lifetime employment sort of move. So it's first establishing that there is a need for employer branding for a company, because I think a lot of the global players think we don't need to worry about that. We'll post jobs online, and that's the need on that. So I think the first thing that we do as a company is making sure that the company is aware of that. when we do a search for companies, we put together an EVP for them, an employer value proposition, which really lays out all the benefits. It's much greater than a job description. We basically build out a whole website for the client so that they can highlight and showcase their company for individuals, because we work with passive talent. So a lot of C-suite aren't looking for new jobs. And so you only have really one path to go and have this conversation with them, and you need to be able to showcase the company. The other thing I think that companies need to be doing is moving to the part of your question about what companies should and could be doing, is that they should always be branding and always be hiring at some point. So simple things like posting on LinkedIn is a simple one. You see DHL Global Forwarding does a really nice job of that. LVMH does a nice job of that. Maersk does a nice job. There's some companies in Japan, foreign capital companies, that you see on LinkedIn. They're in different places. They're always networking. They're branding, and not necessarily, they might hiring, they might not be hiring, but it's always there. So when they do need to switch on and hire, they're ready. And I think that's an important learning tool for companies to tap into.
Yeah, that is actually a really good advice. Even if you're not currently open, don't have a role immediately open, you're always hiring, right? And just by the fact of you having a presence online and letting, the talent pool know that you're hiring, keeps your brand, on top of mind. And the same way, you're not hiring immediately. The candidates are not looking for jobs immediately. They're just looking to see what's out there, who's hiring, what kind of companies are out there. They're doing their research, right? And as you mentioned earlier, AI is such a big factor nowadays in terms of research. And a couple of clicks, couple of conversations, you get a lot of information about the companies and the opportunities that are out there, and you can do quick comparison studies and whatnot. And you do a great job of putting out an annual salary survey guide, a report. So there's a lot of information, a lot of content out there. So definitely keeping that content engine going. What are the other things apart from text-based content? Do you advise clients with doing interview videos with the talent, with the senior leadership, employer branding videos that talk about the organization? Do you suggest any of that for your clients, and are any of them doing such activities?
Not as many do as we would like, but as you and I said, know so well, again, it's about relationship building. And so as much that we can do to encourage relationship building is important. So we do a lot of things around having a newsletter. Again, the podcast is another part where we can highlight certain clients and get their branding out and help them shine a light on what they do. Again, I point out our newsletter. Again, we try to highlight clients, partners as well, to get as much information out there as possible, but then networking, etc. Because you said there's a lot of information out there, but we do our annual salary survey guide, and we had at the French Chamber, we had an event, and one of the things that was very apparent is there's salary survey guides out there, for example, but there's not many that talk about SMEs and what's going on locally in Japan for foreign capital companies. There's a lot for what's going on in, Fortune 500 companies globally. There's a lot of information about Japanese companies in general, but local kind of the, 50 to 200 companies, which make a majority of gaishikes in Japan, there's not a lot of good information in there. And so we pride ourselves in having just Japan-specific information that we provide clients. And I think having that information really helps on branding, helps to know what's going on in their organization and their industries. Just was talking to Pierre Rasmussen at Malay. They just opened up a shop. And, he stressed just how important it was that the information we were giving was for these smaller 50, 60 person global companies not knowing what's going on in Japan. And that helped make good decisions.
Sure. You mentioned earlier LinkedIn, right? And social media in generally has changed, the way recruitment is done and seen globally. How has that, affected? Have you seen those changes in Japan? How is social media changing, the recruitment scene in Japan?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think LinkedIn is a mirage. I hate to say that, especially in Japan. That's again a cultural thing for companies. Apac talent acquisition teams are thinking, okay, we'll go on LinkedIn. We will scout people on LinkedIn. Majority of people are not on LinkedIn in Japan. LinkedIn hasn't done a lot of engineering to help Japan. It's not that big a market for them, so they don't do a lot of work for the Japanese market. So it's not that important. Japanese just don't want to put their public information out there. It's not normal how things are going. And then when they receive a scout mail from, say, a talent acquisition person that's outside Japan, they don't know the person. It's very scary to them. And oftentimes we'll have talents come to us and say, I got this message. What do I do? And so it's interesting mindset because we don't see that in other markets globally. And it's so I think that LinkedIn social media is there, but it's not as foundational in Japan for really as much as we would make it out to be. Really, I think recruiters and talent acquisition teams make it out much more important than it really is. And I think people are wasting a lot of time on it. And thankfully, I think AI will take care of a lot of the time wasted on that.
Yeah, no, you're right. LinkedIn as a platform is slowly growing. I think they've now about 5 million plus. They've hit the 5 million plus member mark. So, I hope they continue to invest in the Japanese market and, improve it as a good platform for thought leadership and then hopefully talent acquisition. Now, you do a lot of work with, executive search, right? Executive level recruitment. What are candidates prioritizing over there? Is it compensation? Is it flexibility, culture, purpose? I'm sure it's probably, a mixture of all of that, but what's the real priority at the top level?
Yeah, when you're getting into the C-suite, money and authority tends to be the big things. Is there the ability to strategize in Japan? Again, if we're looking at companies that are subsidiaries of global companies, how much authority really is in Japan? How much do they have access to board level communication, or is it just execution in Japan? And so that's very important at the C level for the people that we work with. Yeah, that's the number one thing that comes up over and over again.
Yeah. So what's the advice you give, global companies that are entering Japan and looking to hire their first senior leader here?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's a catch-22, right? There's a global mandate and there's a need to grow the market and there's an outcome that needs to be there. There's communication that needs to happen both ways. You and I just said, talking about how some of the leadership here might not be able to strategize as well as their global competitors. So do you not expect to take that authority until it's earned? And so how do you work on that? If you're setting up, if it's already established, then you're going in and seeing where things have broken down before, and can that strategy be executed? Or is it just a very tight leash by headquarters? So I think it behooves both the talent that's going in and interviewing to really interview leadership and board members. And then I always recommend that the board or the leadership that we're advising when they're hiring to go through and check those expectations and have these tough conversations and expect more instead of just hiring for English. I think even at the top leadership, I still see, after 30 years, it still shocks me that we'll have a short list of 3 candidates and HQ will choose the person with the MBA who speaks good English, maybe a job hopper. Wouldn't have been the candidate that I would ever say that would be the first choice, versus someone that might not have, as fluid English, still really good, solid English, proved a solid track record. And oftentimes I've seen talents lose that in a search, which is just amazing to me still.
That's some really good insight and good advice there, David. Thank you. I often hear Japanese hiring processes can be quite slow. Is that still true? Is that costing companies the talent?
Yes and yes. So there's 2 things. Japanese companies I find to be much more bureaucratic. Gaishikei companies, less so. The companies that have good, solid processes in place for bringing in talent will win 9 times out of 10. When I see challenges is we're working on a project with a client and things start to shift and different decision makers come into play that weren't there when we started out the process, or there's just different expectations that move along the way. It will lead to a mistake somewhere along the line. So I recommend to companies coming into Japan that are in Japan, we talk about employer branding. One of the easiest fixes for an SME is to sit down with their leadership team, spend an afternoon, and create a recruitment process for your entry and middle management and upper management. And you have a recruitment process in place. I have an episode about top grading. That's a good process, but it's not the only one. It's not always the right one. The point is to have a good process where you say, okay, the HR always meets them first, line manager meets second, and the president meets third. And there's always 3. The first one's going to be, they're not going to be the same interviews 3 times asking about backgrounds. First one's going to be background, second one's behavior questions, the third one's going to be, exercises or, getting into specific talents, whatever. There's not a right way, but each company has needs. Chart those down and then follow them. And so for those hirings, you keep that process. Then afterwards, if something didn't work, go back to the process, change parts as you need, but then, okay, next time, then we're keeping that. You don't change during the process. And the companies that do that, even if I've got companies that warn us that they have 6, 8, 10 meetings with talent coming in before they make a decision. Oftentimes we would say, oh, you're going to lose talent that way. But as long as everybody has those expectations going into a search, there's never a challenge, because everybody knows where things are going. It's organized. The candidates understand that this is the process. They like that. That sounds like an organized company. They've told us each step of the way what's going on. They've given us timely feedback. That's important. Those things can be done quickly. And you can still do 8 to 10 interviews, and you can put that in a condensed, timely basis. It doesn't need to take 6 months. But when it's hodgepodge scheduling here, this person's traveling, so we can't schedule that, and it just looks very sloppy, and we lose talent that way.
Yeah, it's again some really good advice about creating a process and working through the process. And I find also, in our recruitment, what we do is we let the candidate know what is our process, what's the whole process, the very first meeting, and then how we go through that process and how many steps you'd go and what's involved, because then you're setting expectations, right? And I think a lot of that is definitely down to good leadership and leadership quality, which is my next question to you about, you've worked in labor relationship, you've worked in, leadership development, and how much of the successful hiring ultimately comes down to having good leadership quality, and what kind of leaders do candidates actually want to work for and are looking for in the market?
It's a great question. I'm glad you highlight that. I think that it's not that challenging, and it's not unlearnable for any person to grow and be a good leader. Part of it, that's just having a vision and having the confidence of having a vision that leaders are able to verbalize and to share with others around them. That would be probably the number one quality, is really building up what people want. You talk to so many coaches or trainers or read books. It's always about, what do people want? Most of the time people tell leaders, you're saying, well, I don't want this, or I don't like this, or that's great. Just clarify, what do you want? Let's move towards that. That would be the first one. The second one then is listening and understanding what's going on. So there's a vision. Now, how's that resonating with people around? And how is it being received? And then shifting as needed, but very carefully, very slowly, to, especially in Japan, to make sure that you bring along as many people with you. So
if we zoom out 5 years, 10 years time, what does the future of recruitment in Japan look like? I know it's you don't have a crystal ball, but based on your experience, based on what you're seeing, happening in AI and technology, what do you predict? Yeah, I think it's great. I'm excited. I'm really excited. So again, being a relationship organization, for me, I don't see much change. AI is taking away a lot of the redundancies that we need to do, the research, putting together, formatting, all the administrative work gets to go away. And so these tools are super. AI so far hasn't been able to go and have a decent lunch and a good conversation to really find out what motivates people who aren't actively looking for jobs. What I do see happening is transactional companies going more transactional. We see the recent selling of RGF by Recruit, and that's just them being completely in line with what's coming. They're going more and more towards the transactional side, investing in AI, investing in doing things very transactionally, which is great. Their clientele are big companies that need quick, they need volume. And so I see that's going to be the trend. So these global companies, I think you'll see a very large downsizing. Globally, we already are seeing it. We're not seeing it yet in Japan, but stakeholders are going to demand that, I think. The other thing is companies will be able to do a lot of the transactional recruitment themselves if they, even with their HR, their TA should be able to take care a lot of what needs to be done on a general basis. I had a podcast with Matt Best, which will be out soon. We're just talking about good TAs should be able to hire that 80, 90% of what the company always needs. For example, Apple always needs marketing people. They always need good marketing people. Their TA team will always look to hire marketing people. Now, they don't want to hire a search firm to do that for them. If they need a head of HR, yeah, maybe they'll just outsource that to a search firm because it's that kind of 1%. Then they have that happen once every 10 years. So I find that the future will be much more towards that transactional, and the relationship-built companies will do much better. So I think you're well positioned to continue to succeed and do a fantastic job that Focused Co does in the market. So thank you. Hope so. To close us out, I've got a round of quick fire questions for you, if that's okay. Cool. Let's go. All right. So what's been your biggest cultural aha moment hiring in Japan? Biggest cultural aha. I read through these questions ahead of time, prepare answers, and then you say them, and it's like, oh, but I should have an answer now. But there's so many. Companies still hiring based on English instead of skill sets. How's that? And what's the one hiring mistake companies make here more often than not?
assuming that there's more talent in the market than there is.
And what's the one leadership habit that you've picked up in Japan that you still use every day?
Nemawashi.
Oh,
so
yes.
For our non-Japanese speaking, Nemawashi is basically digging a hole around a tree as an image. And it's just good management. Basically, a manager will say, I have an idea. And then she goes and speaks to 3 or 4 managers and says, I have an idea. What do you think? And goes to the next manager gets buy-in for all those 5 managers, goes into a meeting, and she says, I have this brand new idea. What do you guys think? And everybody agrees.
David, I've done close to 10, the 11th episode I'm recording. I don't know how often this word Nemawashi has come up in all our conversations, whether it's sales, whether it's storytelling, whether it's marketing, whether it's PR. It's just such a beautiful concept in Japan that,
Right.
If you've mastered that, a lot of the issues and challenges and would go away, or you know how to tackle it, right? So it leads me to my last question. If an expat leader landed tomorrow in Japan and asked you for advice, what would be the first piece of advice you gave them?
Find the power center in your company. So what I mean by that is in Gaishikei companies, there tends to be a power center, and it's usually not the president if it's an expat president. It will oftentimes be the CFO, it might be the head of HR, but it's going to be someone that's probably long-term, and they know that the president, the GM, the CEO will switch out in 3 to 5 years, and they're holding the company together. Go and seek out who that individual is and really find a way to be an ally with that person, because they'll be your strongest supporter. They'll often, if you win them on your side, they'll tell you the truth of what's going on. And it's the leaders that really understand that, go and listen to it instead of ignore it and try to steamroll it, do very well in Japan.
That's very, very good advice, David. Thank you for sharing. And this has been such an incredibly insightful conversation. And Japan's talent challenge isn't just an HR issue, as you've highlighted. No. It's a strategic issue. And companies that fail to adapt their employer branding, leadership style, approach to hiring simply won't be able to compete in the decade ahead. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and perspective.
Thank you, Robert. It's been a delight to be here and chat with you.
Thank you. For our listeners, whether you're a CEO scaling in Japan, an HR leader navigating talent shortages, or a professional thinking about your next career move, I hope this conversation is a reminder that the rules have changed. Thank you very much for listening or watching the Asia AIM podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And I'd also love for you to give us a review. Reviews make a huge difference in how other people discover our show. So please do so. Until next time, I'm your host, Robert Heldt, and I'll be back soon with more conversations on how to win in Asia's dynamic and diverse markets.
Thanks for tuning in to the Asia AIM podcast. If today's conversation sparked new ideas or insight, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share the show. For more resources, tips on doing business in Asia, or to book a meeting with our team, visit asiaimpodcast.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll see you in the next episode of Asia AIM.